I'm going to stand out here to be a little closer to everybody so we can interact better. And we have the great privilege of listening to Dan Goodman tell us why we should scuba dive, why people with disabilities could scuba dive, and Tia Maria added some additional things. I'm going to now try to tell you how to scuba dive safely if you're taking care of, you're managing somebody with disabilities. So, my name is Jake Freiberger. I'm an associate professor of anesthesiology at the Duke Center for Hyperbaric Medicine and Environmental Physiology. Duke is located in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, which is right up there. It's way too far from Cozumel as far as I'm concerned. So, and any of you guys that would like to visit us in Duke, we'd be delighted to have you. And just as an aside, anytime during this talk that you'd like to interrupt me, a mí no me importan las interrupciones, o puedo contestar en español si es necesario. I can answer it in English or in Spanish, and I'd be happy. Any interaction is better. So I live in Durham, North Carolina, which is in the state of North Carolina. We have lots of tobacco, which we no longer recommend that you smoke. But I work at Duke University, which was founded with tobacco money, when we still don't recommend that you smoke. But we have lots of very good basketball, lots of fun, and there are two other universities, the University of North Carolina and North Carolina State, within the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, and lots of industry, lots of other areas that have scientific import. We also have a coast. I don't think it's quite as beautiful as Cozumel, but it's also very, very nice. This is a picture from the top of the Cape Lookout Lighthouse on Cape Lookout, which is down to about 150 miles south of Durham, North Carolina. This is the entrance to the Duke Center for Hyperbaric Medicine and Environmental Physiology. The center's been there since 1962. It was remodeled in 1968. We did a series of scientific dives to the depth of 2,225 feet. That's 668 meters in the late 70s and 1980s. This is a picture of the console. It's a large chamber. There are actually 7 chambers hooked together. We treat patients. We do environmental physiology. We can simulate both diving and altitude. Now, for my talk, I want to thank personally Amber Rangel, who's sitting there in the back of the hall. Amber was kind enough to let me interview her by phone in 2017 and talk to me about her experience as an adaptive diver. That's very, very critical to my talk, very, very useful. Amber was a nationally ranked professional water skier, a rock climber. She sustained an incomplete C5-6 injury after a water skiing fall. But she met a Diveheart instructor 6 months after her accident, who referred her for training. She took a Discover Scuba class. She met Jim Elliott. And if you haven't met Jim Elliott, you won't understand this. But once you meet Jim, he is a force of nature. And now Amber is an ambassador for adaptive scuba with Diveheart. And Jim is a very, very persuasive and charismatic guy. My disclosures about the talk is that I am mostly funded by the U.S. Navy for diving research, and also from DARPA, which is another U.S. government institution. I've had some drug company funding in the past, and then I work at Duke University, so I guess I get my money from myself. So let's talk first about, if I'm going to tell you how to dive for how people with disabilities can dive safely, we need to talk a little bit about what the regulations are. And they're very different for the type of diving you might be wanting to do. There are lots of organizations that put out regulations. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration of the United States, the Association for Diving Contractors International for commercial diving. They have the Physicians Diving Group, which makes up medical regulations. I'm on that committee for the Physicians Diving Group. International Marine Contractors Association, IMCA, which has the Diving Medical Advisory Committee. The U.S. Navy with the U.S. Navy Diving Manual. the UK's diving medical committees under the Health and Safety Executive in the United Kingdom. And then, of course, organizations like the Undersea and Hyperbaric Medical Society, the South Pacific Undersea Medical Society, the Divers Alert Network, which of course you guys are familiar with. The Divers Alert Network, in fact, started at Duke University, and most of the faculty were all the original founders. All of us have had positions of responsibility at DAM. And then finally, Duke Dive Medicine, which I'm representing now here today. So when you look about overviewing the fitness to dive assessment in terms of a legal perspective, you need to divide the type of diving candidate into whether he's a commercial diver, he or she, a commercial diver, there are female commercial divers, and whether that person that earns their living from doing a commercial diver is actually doing construction work underwater or is working as a scientific or a recreational scuba instructor, or a military diver. Both of those groups require some sort of compulsory assessment. Now, there is an exception for commercial scuba diving, for scuba diving instructors with the Occupational Safe and Healthy Organization of the United States. In 1979, there was a variance made, meaning that the scuba instructors and scientific divers, and actually public safety divers, do not have to have the same degree of medical fitness as commercial divers. So that means scuba instructors don't need to have an expensive medical exam every year. So that would be very financially prohibitive for them. Now, recreational divers, I've got in blue down there. There are really, in the United States, there are really no rules or regulations that apply to who can or cannot be a recreational diver. So that's critically important when we talk about divers, such as divers with disabilities, who may have problems that otherwise would disqualify them, and in the past have disqualified them from being recreational divers. Basically, the assessment and the decision about whether a diving candidate is medically fit to dive is generally made on site, at the scuba shop, the training area. Sometimes there's a use of the RSTC form, the Recreational Student Training Form, which is put together by Patty, Nowie, the UHMS, Dan, all of us have contributed to that form. But there's really no legal basis for who can or cannot dive from a medical perspective for recreational divers. What is required to dive safely? We're going to talk, and now we're going to switch over a little bit away from any type of commercial or military people and talk more about recreational diving. What are some of the things that are required to dive safely? Well, there are not very many requirements. There's some diving specific skills that this person, that the candidate must have. He must be able to understand the risks of diving. How to not to hold his breath when he's ascending, things of that nature. So there has to be a degree of comprehension, understanding. Maybe it's just the language. Maybe there's some communication or some cognitive deficit that may impact them. They have to be able to equalize their pressure. Okay, so they have to be able to clear their ears, and they have to be able to equalize pressure in any other gas-containing spaces, including their sinuses, but also their equipment. And to understand some of the physics of diving and depth. And finally, there are some minimal exertional needs, just to be able to safely avoid problems with current, getting in and out of the boat, getting in and out of, getting to or away from the dive site. They need to understand, there need to be some degree of risk management for the main diving-related problems, which are drowning, clearly the biggest one, but also barotrauma, and decompression sickness. So steps need to be taken to mitigate these issues when they come up. So the person that's required to dive safely, they need to understand these things. There are no real age prohibitions. We have divers that are in their 80s and 90s that can do that safely, okay? There are few absolute medical prohibitions, and we can go over those, but that's not the purpose of this talk. But essentially, if somebody is capable of meeting these requirements, no matter what their disabilities are, they should be able to safely dive. And if they can meet these requirements, they don't absolutely have to meet those requirements entirely by themselves. They can get help from organizations such as Diveheart. Diveheart can help people that may not be able to understand, may not be able to have the exertional ability to perform the required maneuvers that allow them to dive safely. Okay, so if you look at the standards for fitness to dive, you can sort of describe it as two different types of making a decision. There's, for the commercial diver, and there's a commercial helmet, that's a Superlight 17 over there. There's a list of requirements that commercial divers have to meet. A bunch of check boxes. Can you do this? Can you do this? Do you have that? Do you not have that? And it rules out, it's very specific. So for a doctor trying to make a decision about a commercial diver meeting the fitness requirements, he follows the rules. But for there's a descriptive type of fitness to dive, which there are guidelines and concerns, they're inclusive. This is for people that are recreational divers, and the goal of the doctor, the goal of the scuba instructor, the goal of the advisor is to educate the diver to allow him to understand his limit or her limitations to protect him or herself on their own. Okay, so that brings in organizations like the training agencies, and then I just have Patty's thing up there, but also the Handicapped Scuba Association and organizations like Diveheart. The role is to help and is to instruct. Okay, so what are the problems? Now we've talked about the rules right now, and so we've gotten kind of the more boring part of this out of the way. What are the problems for adaptive divers? How can we meet the requirements to get people that are not completely able to do everything on their own physically into the water, to be able to experience the good things that Dr. Goodman and Tina Marie just talked about in the video and in the talks that preceded my talk. So what are the problems for adaptive divers? Well, the first one is clearly mobility. How well can they get around? Okay. What about the issue of silent injuries? If you have decreased sensation in an extremity, how easy would it be to drag somebody's feet across the coral or burn them on the bottom of the pool from scraping against the hard gunite? Airway protection. How important is it to make sure that somebody doesn't lose the ability to breathe, either by having a problem with their equipment or by, for example, having a seizure underwater and losing the regulator? Big problem. Cardiovascular risks. What are the risks to the heart, the circulatory system of diving, and particularly diving in a person that may or may not have a spinal cord injury? Comprehension and communication. How can you communicate with somebody underwater, that has got a disability that's not even able to make or to easily form the hand signals that we use frequently in scuba diving. Autonomic instability. What are the problems with the spinal cord that actually affect the cardiovascular risk, the airway protection, the silent injuries, and the mobility that may impact a scuba diver? Medication issues. What medications are these guys on? How do the medications interact with oxygen? How do they interact with depth? Finally, how well are we managing any of the aids that they may have? An adaptive aid could be anything from different gloves for a scuba diver like Chris, who uses them to propel himself through the water, to something that may be much more complex, as complex as something as even a ventilator, which Jim has done. Okay, so. The three main features of adaptive scuba are applications, special modification, and techniques enabling the performance of scuba skills. So you apply these things and you use these techniques to get people that otherwise couldn't get in the water. And to do that, they use an enhancement of the buddy system by requiring specially trained dive buddies. Look at these guys here that have been in training all week, with Mark back there. They have worked really hard. It's not a simple matter. Depending on each of the divers, there are special requirements that are required to be a proper buddy. Being a proper buddy may not require simply being able to move somebody into or out of the water. it may be requiring specific communication aids and requirements. Okay. Finally, the buddy system has to be able to manage the adaptive scuba equipment. Do these buddies know how to utilize a full face mask? Do they know how to properly weight a diver with the lead weights or the other types of adaptive equipment that may be around? So these are things that Diveheart is specializing in, learning to do, to be able to use, to allow people to get into the water, to better benefit from the good things that come out of diving. So the critical challenges for adaptive divers, I think the first one is probably airway safety. Meaning, are we allowing them to be able to breathe safely? And I just turned the thing off. Okay, there it's back. Okay. Mobility. Are we able to get them in and out of the water safely? And we saw that yesterday with the rough waves. It's hard work, and it requires a team effort and a lot of coordination. Finally, I want to talk briefly about something a little bit more scientific, the risks of immersion. And a lot of divers, a lot of dive trainers don't really understand this completely. We'll go over it briefly, but it's a little bit more scientific, but I hope I'm not an illusion. So first of all, let's talk about the airway protection. Divers that have limited airway skills or airway abilities may be helped by using a full face mask, something different from your routine scuba regulator. It does have a demand regulator on it. This is an AGA mask, and the diver can communicate as well with a mask like this. There are limitations to using this. You need to be trained to use these masks. I'm not going to go into all the risks of it because it's a long process and it's really very demanding. But these are ways that divers that otherwise may not be able to retrieve a regulator if they lost it, if it fell out of their mouth. One of the first skills any scuba diver learns is to get that regulator, put it back in their mouth. What if you're not able to move your arms well to do this? Well, a full face mask might be the solution. Amber used a full face mask yesterday for everybody. Very, very useful. Okay. I'm going backwards, I'm sorry. Other airway-related risks are, of course, the risk of drowning. So even if say you're not using a full face mask, and somehow you lose consciousness as a diver, you may lose consciousness from low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. You may lose consciousness from having a convulsion, a seizure. Okay. You may lose consciousness from having very low blood pressure, syncope. What are the other airway-related risks? Well, what is the spinal level? That's involved in retrieving a normal standard regulator. What are the operational risks from cognitive or psychiatric problems? Can we communicate with our clients, with our divers, about how important it is to be able to retrieve that regulator, how important it is to make sure that they've got air in their tank, how important it is that they actually comprehend that the risk of losing your airway is a risk of drowning, okay? Finally, there's some other extrinsic risks that are airway related. People that have gas trapping and air embolism with pulmonary abnormalities. If the diver is not trained not to hold his breath, or if he has some pulmonary gas exchange difficulties from either persistent pneumothoraces, problems with blebs in the lungs, problems that would make gas trapping in the lungs an issue, those need to be addressed. Finally, there's an issue of what's called work of breathing. As we go under the water, the pressure increases. It increases linear every 33 feet. Every 10 meters, it's an additional atmosphere of pressure. At 33 feet or 10 meters, there are twice the number of molecules in each breath of gas we take. That's why we burn up our scuba tanks when we're down deeper. Okay? Those additional molecules in each breath have to be moved back and forth. The molecules have mass, they have weight. So that increases the work to move them back and forth. The gas density is up, it's harder to breathe. So people with limited breathing ability, and Dan showed a nice picture of how spinal injury can compromise the ability to take a deep breath will be affected by increased work breathing. Okay. But there are no limits. And I'm just going to show Jim's picture of one of his divers that was actually underwater with a ventilator. And I'll let Jim and Tia Marie explain the details of this diver. But it's a spectrum. And what we're talking about here is taking people that otherwise would not be able to manage diving on their own and allowing them to have an opportunity. And so again, Diveheart's able to do this. Now, finally, let's talk a little bit about immersion physiology. What do I mean by immersion physiology? It means what happens when we get in the water. So tell me, anybody knows, what's one thing that happens when we get in the water? We get wet, right? Okay. But what else? And then there's another issue. You're neutrally buoyant, right? And what do I mean by neutrally buoyant? You're weightless. Okay? Now, most of us are made to be standing up, erect. And so my blood volume, I have some blood in my legs, okay, and in my abdomen that is not in my circulatory system. I have some fluid. But when I get into the water, I become weightless, and that fluid is redistributed, and it goes into my circulatory system. Okay? So between 500 and 800 milliliters of blood from the legs goes into the thorax. Okay? So what does that make you do when you get in the water, when you start diving? What's the first thing that most people have to do when they get in the water and start diving? What do you feel like you need to do? Has anyone ever peed in their wetsuit? I just want to take it. Okay, that's just you have to you redistribute your fluid, and your body recognizes that as fluid overload, and so your kidneys are smarter than you are, so they make urine, and you pee it out. You have a diuresis. Okay, so now this is just a study from the British Journal of Sports Medicine, and they took people and they put them in the water up to about here, and they put them in the water up to about here, then they put them in the water up to about here, and they measured the pressures in their central venous pressure, which is the pressure in the right side of their heart, and it goes up just from being in the water. So you have to pee, but more water goes in there. Is that a good thing? Well, that's probably a pretty good thing, unless you've got heart disease, okay? And that can be a problem. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, the mammalian diving reflex also actively contributes to central fluid redistribution. I'm going to put that into English. Do you know what I mean by the mammalian diving reflex? We're mammals, right? Okay? So what's mammals, okay? And there are all other animals that are seals and whales and other air-breathing mammals. When they go underwater, well, most of them are underwater all the time, but when they go deep underwater, they have a reflex that allows them to hold their breath for a very long time. People have this too, okay? And this is called the diving reflex. The first part of the diving reflex is apnea. So like if you take a young baby, and you put them underwater, do they drown? You've heard about, children being born, in swimming pools, okay? They don't drown because they have a reflex to not inhale when they're underwater. It's a normal reflex that we have. Now, what's the rest of that reflex? Well, you get vasoconstriction, your blood vessels constrict, so more fluid goes into the central compartment, okay? More blood shifts to the thoracic cavity, and you get a slow heart rate, what's called bradycardia. Your heart rate slows down because you've got lots of fluid in there. You don't need to have as many heartbeats because each beat has more fluid in it, okay? Now, this is a response to a phase immersion in cold water through one of the cranial nerves. Now, it's not important to remember that, but I can promise you that you can hold your breath longer underwater than you can in the air. And this is why. If you take the record of like David Blaine, who held his breath for over about 18 minutes with 100% after breathing 100% oxygen, he did it in the water. It's easier to do it like that because of this reflex. And if you do it almost all mammals have it. This is a pig that's sticking his nose into a bucket of cold water, and his heart rate slows down. And honest to God, it even works in graduate students. You can stick their head in the water too. Their heart rate slows down. So it's real. It's a real effect. Okay. Now, what's the problem with this? Okay. All this blood and fluid going into your central vasculature, well, it can overload the system. And there's an issue, there's a condition called emergent pulmonary edema. And we've studied this extensively at Duke. And we've looked at, this is one of our hyperbaric chambers. And that's Stephanie Martina, who's observing a subject in the pool in a hyperbaric chamber. So we can simulate a dive. We can turn the chamber, make it dive to 100 feet if we want to, just by twisting the knob. We don't have to go out on a boat to do a dive. And the guy in the back is Danny Martinez, who's running an echocardiogram, a portable echocardiogram to measure the volume of this subject's heart. And so we're testing them in the chamber, okay? So emergent pulmonary edema is caused by fluid redistribution, and it's basically water in your lungs, like people with heart failure. But we see this actually in folks that are in really, really good condition. And so it's a problem from immersion, and I'm going to tell you that it's worse in people that have spinal diseases because they can't really control things with the reflexes to the same degree that uninjured people do. But anyway, the increased fluid can lead to fluid in the lungs, okay? And again, I mentioned the increased work of breathing from increased gas density. Now, I'll tell you the story of a triathlete named Catherine Calder-Becker, who she lives in Toronto, and she's a real world-class athlete. This is a person who can run and perform triathletes. They have there's a swimming portion of it, there's a running portion of it, and a cycling portion of it. And she's in extremely good health. But over the period of about 2 years, she went into emergent pulmonary edema. This is a very fit woman. Into emergent pulmonary edema 4 times. Had to be rescued once. They pulled her out of the water, took a chest x-ray, it was white because of all the fluid in her lungs. But she had this condition of emergent pulmonary edema. So she got very interested in it. She started looking and asked other triathletes whether they had it. And there's a whole group of people that are susceptible to getting emergent pulmonary edema. And so Catherine actually wrote this peer-reviewed article about it. And she found out that we were interested in doing this, so she came to Duke. This is our same swimming pool, and the same one of our in Foxtrot chamber we've got. And so here's Catherine. So we were making her breathe all these different gases, and we're putting her underwater, and then we're making her exercise in cold water, underwater, and we dived her. And so she ended up getting emergent pulmonary edema. And we dropped her, we put an arterial line in her and a pulmonary catheter, and we put her in and out of the water. And you can see her smiling, but she's really not smiling because that water is very cold. And here she is coming out of this, standing with us after the study. And we've figured out exactly what happens, that it's really true that the blood pressure in your central vasculature goes way up with emergent pulmonary edema, with exposure to cold water and exercise. So this is a real thing. This is not something that we're making up, and it's a real problem. We can't necessarily figure out what's going on with people that we don't know exactly why people get this or are born with it, but we do know that it's a faulty reflex, and we do know that this applies to people with spinal cord injuries. And these are some pressure changes that you see. And I'm not going to go over them, but there are some abnormalities that you see in people with emergent pulmonary edema that are not there in normal folks. So let's talk about these problems, and I'm going to use Amber again. I hope you don't mind. This is a picture of her being cold. and this is a problem for people that have spinal cord injuries. They can have thermal instability, autonomic instability. They can have different reflexes that are not our normal reflexes. So even a little bit of discomfort, like a full bladder or cold exposure, can, I think in Amber's case this time, you get headaches, right? When she starts to get a mass reflux, she doesn't, I don't know whether you feel pain or not, but she notices it, she knows what's going on, and this is a problem for people with spinal cord injuries. And they can't really compensate for the stress of immersion. So they're susceptible to immersion pulmonary edema. And something, if you guys are going to do this, you need to know a little bit about this, okay? And like I said, for at least for Amber, I know that when she starts to feel autonomic instability, it's manifested, she notices it quickly, it's manifested by a headache or discomfort, probably from a rise in blood pressure. And that's what we see with this mass reflex that happens. Okay. So, what are some of the effects of neutral buoyancy and immersion? Well, I think that primarily, although we've just been talking about all the bad things that occur with neutral buoyancy and immersion, there's some good things. And here I've got several adaptive divers performing and enjoying the water. I think the weightlessness in the exercise are very significant factors in providing pain relief for these guys. And I'd like to encourage you to be able to provide this to some of the divers with disabilities. Okay, now let's discuss the issues of access and mobility. We saw this yesterday on the boat, getting in and out of the boat. It's a real issue. And I think that if you talk to most of the divers, Becky and Chris, tell me if I'm wrong, that it's one of the more concerning parts of the dive is getting on and off the boat. It's not necessarily the dive itself, it's getting to the water and getting into the water and getting out of the water. There are lots of problems associated with that, but they're always very person-specific. The mobility issues, we can go over a whole long list. I'm not going to do that, but it's all related to, what the specific problem that diver may have. Okay. Now, if you look at the other parts of mobility-related risk, buoyancy control may be a little bit more difficult for people that have spinal injuries because they decrease muscle mass from lack of use, okay? Ankle weights are needed, and the risk of a rapid ascent in arterial gas is always there. Now, the three divers that we were diving with yesterday are I think, very experienced, and they're able to control their buoyancy better than most normal divers. I think you guys should be commended. That's really, really impressive for me to watch that. But the other issues of getting in and off the boat and other problems are easy to just kind of overlook, but they're there. They're always there. Finally, if a diver that's got decreased sensation, already has patches of numbness, already has some motor weakness, gets bent, gets the case of decompression sickness, it's going to be much more difficult for an evaluating doctor to figure out whether or not this is real decompression sickness or whether it's simply part of the underlying symptoms that the person has. Okay. Mentioned before the issue of silent injury. If somebody is not able to move their body out of the way of some type of trauma, just simply the bottom of the swimming pool, or dragging their feet, or insensate extremities across coral, that could be a problem. And they may come up with injuries that could be very serious, even fractures that are not noticed. Okay. Finally, there are issues with implants. Issues with sunburns. If you don't feel that you're getting sunburned, you may stay out of the sun too long. Lots of divers with disabilities may have latex allergies because they've been exposed to latex multiple times. Okay? And then there may be an issue that puts them at slightly increased risk of decompression sickness because of decreased blood flow to areas that otherwise would get nitrogen off gas more rapidly. Okay, now I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and talk a little bit about training. We've got Mark here and Jim, they're the experts, and you should speak with them. But you need training to manage unexpected events. So you never know when an unexpected event is going to happen. I think that's going to work. Oh, it didn't work. There's an anchor that falls down on that boat. I don't know if you've seen that. And it's an unexpected event. Sorry that didn't shock. But right. So the client divers training curriculum. Well, the divers that are trained through Diveheart need to go do at least 2 to 3 months in the pool. Okay, they have a suite of the same buddies. So they train with people that they learn how to communicate with and trust. Okay. They focus on building trust to overcome fear of the water. And these are things that Amber told, okay, and Jill. Mobility plan. How are they going to get to the water? How are they going to get out of the water? Mass control, buoyancy, communication. All these things are key training aspects for the curriculum for diver. The levels of training. Diver, buddy, instructor, and trainer. Okay? Adaptive dive buddy, somebody that's scuba certified, proficient in skills, and at least 20 open water dives. Okay? Advanced dive buddy, certified, 40 open water dives, CPR and first aid, certified as an adaptive dive buddy, or enrolled in a joint course. Am I correct on all these? I tried to be proficient in it. So, an adaptive scuba instructor must already be certified, renewed, and insured as an instructor with a recognized scuba training agency. So, you still got to be a dive instructor, but you've got to be much more than a dive instructor as well. Have both the advanced and basic adaptive dive buddy certifications, or enrolled in a joint adaptive dive buddy adaptive scuba instructor course. Finally, an adaptive instructor trainer is the highest level. Must be certified, renewed, and insured as an instructor or instructor trainer with a recognized scuba training agency who has done these things. Directed or co-directed at least 10 adaptive scuba experiences, certified at least 10 adaptive dive buddies, certified at least 10 adaptive divers, served as a team leader at least 10 times. So I guess that's 10 times 10 times 10. No, that's right. Okay. So, what's the training? Okay. For dive masters looking for to guide certified adaptive divers on fun dives and help them explore the local area. It's fun. I think this is if you're into it and you like to see people smile, you guys should, in the scuba business, should give this a try. How many people are in the actual scuba business here? Quite a few, right? Or at least some. And keep turning this off. All right, an adaptive scuba instructor for certified dive instructors who would love to offer a ticket to the underwater world to people with a variety of physical challenges. Okay. They have to renew their certification annually. They have to have proof of insurance, refresher courses, and Diveheart compliance is recognized by the RSTC. Okay. It recognizes that scuba skills can be performed with assistance of specially trained and competent adaptive dive buddies. So again, we're talking about the whole spectrum of divers, all the way from divers that require a lot of assistance, divers that don't. Okay. So finally, it's implied that an adaptive dive instructor should be trained in the use of adaptive aids. So how to get the diver to the water, mobility aids, ramps, elevator lifts. How to get the diver around in the water, amputation extensions, fins, red gloves. How to protect the diver when he's in the water so that they don't get a silent injury. Wetsuits, thermal protection, booties, all these things to make them better. And the technology's there, the technology is constantly changing. We really don't know what we're going to have next. We may have even, external suits that move people around and help people walk, with external mobility suits. So they're actually working on that at Duke right now in biomedical engineering. Okay. So what must be what must be understood to be an effective medical consultant? So if anyone is in the medical field here, you really should try to understand the risks, okay, of further injury or accident, of worsening the disability or pain for these folks, okay? The risk of decompression systems, the gas emboli. You should understand immersion-related problems. You should understand impaired autonomic control, and you should, best as possible, understand the operational issues for the health risk, patient's performance, and avoiding panic. So if you're going to be on the medical side, these are things that you should be concerned about. Because before you assign a diagnosis, okay, you need to rule out all the non-medical causes for any of the symptoms. So don't be quickly assigning, since somebody has a problem, assigning a problem to decompression sickness or gas emboli before you ruled out some other problem that the person has. And this applies to any diver, any doctor, evaluating somebody who's been diving. Don't just assume that it's all dive related. Okay? Plan for success, train the use of adaptive aids, understand the technology, work in teams, okay? Be able to communicate, know the different roles for each of the people that are participating. Okay? And trust. Reliance on the buddies, the other team members, and the divers. That's really key. And I think that there are probably 4 T's that are involved in any of this adaptive training. Training, technology, teamwork, and trust. Okay. So I think that I'll reiterate what I understand the Diveheart mission to be is to build confidence, independence, and self-esteem. Huge thing, especially for people who suffer some traumatic problem. To grow the community. Just expand this, provide this service to other folks so that they can enjoy it as well. Provide, in addition to the diving, social, vocational, and educational opportunities. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of human physiology that's involved in immersion, in diving, and exposure to extreme environments. I find that fascinating. I think most of you might as well. Okay. And finally, to facilitate research on the physiological and psychological therapeutic benefits of scuba, the things that Dan was talking about earlier in the first lecture. Okay? So, the adaptive procedures, there are lots of things that need to be kept up. Again, I'm using Amber again, but the thing that she talked to me about multiple times in the interview was how she has to trust the people that she's working with and how they have to trust her to tell them how she's doing. Very, very important. It's a communication issue. Okay. There are multiple things. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it. When I saw yesterday how we went through a checklist that took about 15 minutes of multiple things to do before and during the time in the water, and how Dan carefully went over that with her, was really impressive. Okay, it's a long checklist, not something off the cuff. You feel okay to jump in the water. No, it's not that. Is this thing here? Is this piece of equipment in there? What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? That long checklist is very, very important. All right, communication, experience, and trust, key. Critical to building trust. The communication issue in people that have high-level spinal injuries, they may not be able to communicate with their hands. Special signs may be needed for all these different things. Pain, cold, fatigue, okay. And the buddy needs to be able to understand those things. Okay, so what are the benefits? The sense of accomplishment, a new identity, exercise, weightlessness, socialization. I think all these things are really key. So I'm going to kind of wind this up. This is another thing. I just really love seeing these guys move underwater with, being liberated, as Jim says. I think that's a huge thing. So it's something that's very impressive and very helpful for all of us. Socialization is also a huge part of this. What great fun I think everyone has had this week during this trip. Just enjoying, just sitting around having dinner together and watching. So, Amber, this is late because I know you've probably made more trips. I think you've been to Thailand since I talked to you. But some of her personal experiences. But the final one is what to tell the doctor: be open-minded, be patient, and trust the process. Okay. So for all of you that are in the medical field, that's what I would recommend. So I'm happy to take any questions or do my best to clear up any confusion I've left you with. So thank you very much.